Hey, what's up? I'm Norris and welcome back to another sew along. Now today we'll be working on my wife, Mimi G style, her latest Simplicity pattern, which is number 9598. So just remember, whenever you see me, just know wifey is extremely busy and she has me, so I'm gonna get it done. So let's get started. Now, if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, please click the sewing basics video in the link below. If you need further instructions from that, because this is not a learn to sew video, I would encourage you to sign up to sewitacademy.com, where you have access to the first 5 courses if you sign up for the free trial, okay? Now, once you get all your things together, let's get started. All right, just like I was saying, we're using Mimi G Simplicity pattern 9598. Now, we're doing view A, which is the solid, but I think we're doing the longer skirt. We're not doing the contrasting, so you will see just one solid color. So if you look to the back and up top, you want to look at suggested fabrics. It says stretch knits only, so all stretch knits, and just an example would be a rib knit. It also says interfacing, which you would need a fusible knit. I don't think I have a fusible knit, so I won't be putting a regular fusible interfacing. So if you have a fusible knit, you can use that for this project. And then for notions, you will need 3/4 of a yard of a 1/2 inch wide elastic. Also look at all the sizes and make sure your body measurements is somewhere close to those sizes. But more importantly, you can come down here where it says finished garment measurements, and you can base what size you want based off the finished garment measurement, because these patterns do have some type of ease in it. Okay, so let's go through all the pattern pieces that we'll need for this project. Okay, so first I'm gonna start with pattern piece number 5. This is the back facing. Now you want to cut one of these on the fold of fabric and then one on the fold of interfacing. Now, like I said before, you want to use a fusible knit interfacing and not just your regular interfacing. If you don't have it and you still want to just move on with this project, you're okay to do it, because I'm doing the same thing. It'll help with the interfacing if you had it, to add a little bit more stability to your facing, but it's really not that needed if you just want to do the project and you don't have it. Next, we have pattern piece number 2. This is the front band. You want to cut 4 of these out of fabric if you're doing view A, which is the one that don't have contrasting. But if you're doing the contrasting one, you want to cut 2 out of one fabric and then 2 out of the contrasting fabric. Next, we have pattern piece number 6. This is the back elastic guide. You do not have to cut this out of fabric. You're just going to align up your 1/2 inch elastic and cut it to this length. Next, we have pattern piece number 4. Now this is the back. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric. And once again, if you're doing the contrasting one, you want to cut 1 out of one fabric and then another one out of your contrasting fabric. Next, we have pattern piece number 1. Now this is your front pattern piece, and you want to cut 2 of these out of fabric. If you're doing 2 different ones, you want to cut 1 out of one fabric and then the other one out of your contrasting fabric. Next, we have pattern piece number 7, which is your sleeve. You want to cut 2 of these out of your fabric. You want to cut 1 out of one fabric if you're doing the 2-tone, and the other one out of your contrasting fabric. But if you're doing a 2-tone, you want to make sure that your pattern piece is faced the right way and positioned the right way on your fabric, so you don't get 2 lefts out of 2 different colors. You see what I'm saying? This right here has a cut line for view B, which is the short sleeves. And then obviously you cut this right here for the other view. But you will see that my sleeve pattern piece will be down to here because wifey wanted hers just a little bit longer. And then last but not least, we have pattern piece number 3. Now this is your bodice back. You want to cut 2 of these out of fabric. And just like I've been saying, if you have the 2-tone or contrasting fabric, you want to cut 1 out of one fabric and then the other one out of your contrasting fabric. Okay, so once you have all of your pattern pieces cut out of your fabric, we can begin sewing. Okay, so first things first, I went ahead and grabbed my 2 front pieces, and we're right sides facing. We're going to pin the front, starting at the dot at the top. And then now we're just going to continue pinning all the way down, and don't forget to pin at the double notches in the front. Okay, so now before moving on to the machine, I just want you to know that because we're working with a knit fabric, you can use your serger machine for most of your seams, and also you can use a narrow zigzag stitch or a stretch stitch whenever you sewing horizontal, because it's going to have to stretch. And if you have a regular stitch and you're trying to get it on, they're going to pop. Now, that's not as important if you're doing a vertical stitch, but it won't hurt to do a narrow zigzag stitch or a stretch stitch when it comes to your vertical seams, just like this right here. And also, you want to use a stretch needle. Now, because this is a stretch fabric, you want to switch your needle out for a stretch needle. You're going to get a better stitch. All right. So now that I have all of that covered, we're going to start at the dot and we're going to go all the way down to the hem using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so we're back from the machine. I went ahead and pressed that seam open. Now the good thing with knits, they don't really fray at the end, so you can serge the ends if you want, or you can just leave them the way they are. So now I gave mine a good press open, and then next you want to grab 2 of your bands. And right sides facing, you want to place your bands onto each other, and I'm going to pin at my dots first. Now there are 2 dots right here. We're going to start at 1 dot and then stitch up to the other dot using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So stitch dot to dot, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so we're back from the machine, and I went ahead and took my band and pressed my seam open. So now we're going to attach this to our front. Okay, so right sides facing. Let me lay it down so we can see. We're going to take this right here, and we're going to apply it to one side, and then we're going to take the other side, and then we're going to pin it to the remaining side. So I want you to match it up in the center, give it a pin. And there should be a notch. Match that up. Okay, now we're going to head to the machine. We're going to start in the center and stitch all the way down to the end using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then we're going to start right back at the middle and then go down the other side. So do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. I went ahead and pressed my seam allowance towards my band, and then I gave it a good press, and I also trimmed off some of that seam allowance down to about 3/8 of an inch. Okay, now you want to take your remaining band, which is now going to be the facing, and do the same thing. You want to stitch it from dot to dot and then press the seam open. And then on the bottom where we have that notch at, you want to take that. I did a little 1/2 inch seam allowance across the bottom and then up the other side like you see right here. And then I just press that up towards the facing, and then I gave it a good press. Okay, so you want to do the same exact thing. So once you give it a good press, I'm going to trim some of that bottom off right there, just so we can press up. Okay, so now that's perfect. So you want it just like that and give it a good press. And then once you do that, with right sides facing, you want to place that over your band and you will pin. Then you want to make sure that that seam lines up right in the center. We're going to head to the machine. We'll start at the center and go up one side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then the same thing here, starting in the center, up the other side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, so moving along, back from the machine, and I went ahead and stitched here. And as you can see, I trimmed my seam allowance. So I placed my facing up like this, and I edge stitch on the facing side here and then here, just so that facing can roll on the inside and you won't see that stitching. Okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it wrong sides facing up for a second, and then I'm just going to turn this down like this, making sure that we have that 1/2 inch still tucked in on that facing. And then we're just going to make sure we have everything in place, and then giving this a good press. So your band and facing should look like this, wrong side facing up. So go ahead and give this a good press, and then we're going to move along to our back bodices. Okay, now I have the back bodice. Now this is the wrong side facing up. Now along this side here, we're going to do a double fold and then top stitch. But first what you want to do is you want to go ahead and press the seam allowance. Now the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, so I went ahead and turned over 5/8 of an inch and gave it a good press. Then all you have to do is just take that raw edge and then tuck it underneath like that, and then pin on the front side. Now that we have it double folded, we can head to the machine, turn it to this side here, and stitch, catching that fold underneath all the way down with the top stitch. Now before we head over, I'm going to turn it right back where the wrong side is facing up, and we have 2 dots right here. I have 2 notches here instead of dots, but it's the same thing. The dot should be right here. So what you want to do is you want to do a basting stitch starting about an inch past that dot or that notch, whatever you want to do, and using the seam allowance 5/8 of an inch, you want to stitch, and then you want to go an inch past this dot or this notch. So once you do that, I'm gonna go ahead and get my scissors, and then now I'm going to slash all the way onto my stitching. And then you want to slash down to the stitching on this side. Okay, so now we're going to press this up where we have that basting stitch at, and then we're going to tuck in that raw edge. So we have a double fold here and a double fold here, and then just like this side, you want to turn it to the right side, and you just want to top stitch it from that slash all the way here to the other slash, making sure that we catching underneath. Okay, so do all of that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, now that we have the side right here double folded and stitched on top, catching that fold, and then the same thing for our cutout, we're going to take the right. So I have the right sides facing up, and this right here is how the right side look. Okay, this is the back right bodice. So right side is facing, we're gonna fold it onto itself like this, and we're gonna match up that notch, and then also the dot here, and we're going to pin. Okay, so I have it folded up like this. Now we're just going to head to the machine. We're going to stitch starting at that dot, and we're going to stitch all the way up using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, starting here, going up using 5/8 of an inch. Once you do that, come back and we'll continue. Only do the right side. Okay, so we're back from the machine. I went ahead and took that seam allowance and pressed it up, and now the right side looks like this with an opening right here that should be finished around the edges as we did earlier. Okay, so there's a little hole there. So now we're going to take the left side and we're going to keep it right sides facing up, and we're just going to stick the bottom portion through that opening until we get to the center where the double fold is at. And right now it'll look basically like this. Okay, so now that we're here, we want to take the top and fold it down like this, right sides facing. And you want to take the right and move it out the way as much as possible, and then we're going to pin on this side here, matching that notch. Okay, I'm gonna move everything out the way on the right side, and I'm gonna start where those 2 big dots meet, right there in the center, and then I'm gonna back stitch and stitch all the way across until I get to this side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, now that we have the left side closed right here, I went ahead and pressed my seam up again, and then now it looks like this. And now we're gonna take this, put it to the side, and we're gonna work on our back skirt. I already have my 2 pieces right sides facing. I'm gonna go ahead and turn it this way. Now this is the bottom, my hem is here. This is the top where you see the curve at for the hip. Now there should be a dot here. So you wanna go ahead and pin at that dot first. Now this is the center back. And there should be 3 notches up here indicating that it's the center. So starting at that dot down here, you wanna back stitch and then stitch all the way up to the top using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, moving along, as you can see, I have my back skirt placed right side up. As you can see, the seam is pressed open. Now at the top, you should have 2 small dots, 1 on each side, but I put up a notch instead of a dot, and then you have a notch right here. So you wanna take your back bodice. Now this right here is the bottom. Now right side is facing. You want to place it onto the skirt, okay, the back skirt. Now that first notch should match up just like this. Pin that notch, and then at that dot where you see I have the notch here, you want to have it meet right there, that fold, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and just pin here for right now. Okay, so now that I have it pinned, the instructions tell you to go ahead and base this down, but I'm gonna go ahead and just sandwich my back facing just like this. With everything like this, you just want to unpin. You want to match up that notch first and just pin through all 3 layers. So now we're sandwiching the back bodice within the back facing and also the back skirt. Okay, so now I'm going to start on the end and stitch through all 3 layers, and then continue stitching on just the 2 layers, and then start back on the 3 layers here. So just start here and go all the way across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, I'm back from the machine. I went ahead and understitched 2. I just took the seam allowance and I placed it towards the facing, and then edge stitch right at that seam but on the facing side, and then I turned it and I pressed it down, as you can see right here. Okay, so now I'm going to lift it up. So now I'm just going to take the elastic, and I'm going to take the top of the elastic and I'm going to place it right underneath that seam right there. Okay, and then with the ends I'm going to make sure it's touching that side seam, and then the top of the elastic is touching right there at the bottom of that seam. And then I'm going to pin, right? And then I'm going to do the other side the same way. Tack this down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then the same thing on the other side. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. I went ahead and tacked down the elastic on the end, and then next I'm just going to fold down the facing. And then now we can just head to the machine and we're going to base this side down using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to put a pin there. Okay, and then we're going to tack this down doing the same exact thing. Okay, I went ahead and based down the sides, and now underneath the elastic is going to be free in the center, so don't be disturbed if it's just hanging. It's supposed to be free. And then I went ahead and tacked down the back facing onto that center seam here, okay, just so it can't move. So now that this right here is in place, let's go ahead and finish out our shoulders. All right, so now this right here is the front. This is the band, and this is the band facing. I have it turned up so you can see it for right now. And then we're going to take our back, and there should be a notch up here that you can match up. And then I have the fold right here of the back stopping right here where that seam is for the band and the band facing. Okay, so I'm gonna pin it right there, and then the same thing on the other side. All right, so the instructions tell you to base, making sure that the seam for the front and the actual band is faced towards the band. So making sure that that seam allowance is faced up. You can base starting where that fold is to the end of the fabric. But I'm not gonna base, I'm just gonna do one stitch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take the facing and I'm going to fold it over the back just like this. And I'm going to repin. So this right here is the 1/2 inch that we pressed on our facing. So that should hang over 1/8 of an inch past that seam here on our facing and our front on the other side. Okay, so you want to pin there as well. All right, so we're going to head over to the machine and we're going to stitch on this end all the way across. Okay, now even if you based it down first, you still have to do this stitch. Okay, so start here and then stitch all the way across. All right, you want to do the other shoulder the same exact way. And if it's a little difficult for you, I'm gonna do it one more time on this side. So basically I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it over the back, and then I'm going to take my pin out and repin it here. And then on the facing side here that's pressed up, you want that to extend past your band and your front seam, okay? At least by 1/8 of an inch. So stitch from here all the way across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. I went ahead and stitched across both shoulders. And then now I'm just going to trim down the seam allowance. I'm gonna trim mine down to about 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so now I'm going to turn this right side out. But first I'm going to take this here, that facing, and I'm going to turn it like that. Okay, so you should get a clean finish underneath, and then the same for this side here. And when you do this, the rest of the seam allowance is going to naturally face the front. So now I'm going to flip the back upward so you can see it like this. So now we're going to take the facing and then tuck it in just like this. And then that's how the front is going to look. So now I'm going to flip it wrong sides facing up. So the wrong side's facing up, you want to make sure that 1/2 inch is turned under on the facing, and that facing should extend at least 1/8 of an inch past that seam allowance right there. And once you have it in place, you can pin it on the front side, just like this, okay? Now that we have it pinned on the other side, we're going to turn it to the front side and we're going to head to the machine and we're going to stitch in the ditch. Basically going to put our needle right there where that seam is, and we're going to stitch all the way until we get to the center, pivot, and then all the way to the other side here. Back stitching at the beginning and also at the end, and you should be catching that fold on the other side. Okay, so do that, come back, and we'll continue. Okay, as you can see, this right here is the wrong side facing up. It's nice and clean on the inside. You can trim this portion right here off right here. And then I press my seams towards my front. And then on the right side, you can see that it's nicely finished, okay? So you can just give this a good press. And then now we're gonna turn this to the side, and we're gonna put in our sleeves. Now the instructions don't have you put in the sleeves right now. but it's good to put it in now because you can do one continuing stitch to stitch up your armhole all the way down to the hem of the dress. Now this is good to do it this way because this is a good way to baste it all the way down, and then you can do a fitting, and if it's good you can make adjustments, and then you can go ahead and put a stitch all the way through. But now let's just go ahead and add the sleeves real quick. One of my sleeves on right side's facing. You want to take the double notch and match it up with the double notch on your sleeve. The double notch indicates the back. I put a notch for the center, a single notch towards the front. So you'll have to pull a little bit to get it all the way even. So just pull when you need to, and then pin. So now let's just head to the machine. We're gonna stitch on one side and go all the way across to the other side using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you want to do the other sleeve the same exact way, and then come back and we'll continue. Okay, as you can see, the sleeves are attached, and what we're gonna do is I'm gonna turn everything onto itself, right sides facing, and I went ahead and serged my seam allowance here on the sleeve. So once you turn it onto itself like this, you want to take the sleeves and you want to match up those seam allowances right there and pin. Now I have my seam allowances facing the dress. Pin on my sleeve here, and then we're going to continue this down the dress. Now this is why it was so important for us to put the sleeve on first, and then now we just do one stitch all the way down. So let's go ahead and continue pinning. There should be a notch right there. You can go ahead and do a basting stitch first if you just want to give it a good fit to see what it feels like. Maybe you want to bring it in more, or you want to let it out some. I'm going to start at the top of your sleeve, go all the way down under your arm, and then down the side all the way down. Now the seam allowance is 5/8 of an inch, so go ahead and do that, and you want to pin and sew your other side the same exact way. Okay, so I'm back from the machine. I went ahead and stitched down both of my side seams, and then now I'm just going to take this and turn it right side out. And also, as you can see, I went ahead and serged that stitch. Okay, that's how the front look, and this how it looks on the back, just like this. And then next, I'm just going to show you how to finish off the hem with this back split. Okay, so this is the hem. Usually we don't show you the hem because it's pretty simple, but this is a split, so I will demonstrate it. So the hem allowance is 1 1/4 inches. So I have my seam gauge, 1 1/4 inches. So what you want to do is you want to take one side of your split in the back, unfold that seam allowance, and then you want to turn this up 1 1/4 inches. Well, it's too far. There we go. And then you want to pin, and then you want to do the same thing to the other side. Open that seam allowance up here, and then turn that up. All right, next I'm just gonna go and stitch this down right here using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then you wanna do the other side the same exact way right here. All right, so do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, I'm back from the machine. So what you wanna do now is just take this and turn it right side out. And then it's gonna automatically turn that seam allowance on that split inside. And then the same on the other side. Okay, so now that's a clean finish. And now what you want to do is you want to go around the existing hem and turn it up 1 1/4 inches. You can also use your seam gauge and get it right. And then once you do that, you just want to pin it in place. pin it in place on the outside. Okay, and then once you press it and get all of it and get the entire seam allowance pressed up and pinned in place, you want to go to the machine and stitch on top, catching underneath. Okay, you want to do that all the way around until you get to the other side. Okay, so do that, come back and we'll continue. Okay, I'm back from the machine. As you can see, I did the hem. And then last thing you have to do for this split is 1/4 inch or 3/8 of an inch away. You want to just egg stitch around that opening. Okay, so once you do your hem, the last thing you want to do is finish the hem of your sleeve. And one last look at the back. Everything is nice and neat. And you're all done. All right, congratulations. Now, I hope you enjoyed this sew along, and remember to tag us both at Mimi G Style and also at Norris Dancer 4 so we can see all your amazing makes. All right, see you in the next one.